I just want to make a few comments and tie some things together with these presentations. I think, obviously, they connect so much with a lot of the themes we've been talking about in the course of this seminar, particularly in the last 2 days on the conflict in Donbass. Specifically, of course, Anna's paper, uh, it's okay. Anna's paper picks up a lot of these issues of civil society, right, and the role of civil society organizations. And of course, Amondine's work really connects with Jennifer Carroll's work on sort of these memes and activizations of ideas and this sort of the semiotic concept of the sniper, right? And of course, with Ralph Clem's work too on credibility and the credibility of images and how they can play a role in the transfer of knowledge and information. But I actually think these papers go together really well and open up a different conversation, building on Anna's final comment about the Sovok and Soviet values, and that both papers are really about this sort of world of the post-Soviet space as a space, and that the experience of Afghansi is an experience of Afghansi across the entire Soviet space, right? So here we see them divided, but this is a Soviet experience, right? And for Amandine, the legend of the sniper coming from the Soviet experience in World War II, right, carried through these other wars, but that this is a legend and a cultural understanding from the Soviet experience in World War II that we see activated today. So in a way, these papers are very interesting, and I think questioning how we talk about the Soviet past in the present, actually. And I want to point to, and this will be sort of questions and comments for both of you. For Anna, I'd like you to elaborate a bit more on what you were just saying at the end of your presentation, and particularly this idea of, at the end of your paper, you talked about the necessity for situational explanations versus cultural explanations. And this idea that Afghansi is not an explanation, it's not an explanatory factor. It's there. It's something that someone has in their repertoire, and it can be activated at a certain moment. So I'd like you to sort of talk about that a little bit more, and I'd like you to speculate a little bit on the Russian side. In other words, you had this Ukrainian side of these lovely stories of, hey, I'll call you, and then you can move to the other side. But if you interviewed the Russian Afghanists, do you think that you get the same story, or might the story be different? In other words, might the activation of Afghansi activate differently in Russia than in Ukraine?
I'm not sure if I can respond properly. Let's just start from this. What was striking in my fieldwork, of course, I made interviews only with the Ukrainian side, but I read a lot of things published by Afghansi on the separatist side. And the similarity of discourses in both cases was really striking. They were building up their involvement on the same values. My country is in danger. I have to defend my motherland, and we, the Afghansi, are the ones who once proved we could defend our motherland. So this was a kind of departure point of this reflection on war as a situation and the place of Soviet values, which, from my point of view, cannot explain the involvement on the one side or on the other side. Because the same values, actually these values of patriotism and self-sacrifice, etc., were reactivated on the Ukrainian side. They were not active for a long time and reactivated with the war and started to be socially valorized again. So it helped Afghansi a lot, but it was also the case on the opposite side. From my point of view, we often, especially when talking about fighters, battalions, volunteers, have the feeling that war radically switched identities. We had a civil identity, people had civil identity before the war, and then Maidan is the turning point, Maidan or anti-Maidan is the turning point, and some different human beings emerged with a dominant other identity. My research shows the exact opposite, that people are building up their previous experience and situations they experienced, and the networks don't disappear, and the social statuses do not disappear. They adjust to war. And I think we have to combine this, sociological pre-war explanation and what we observe in war conditions.
And I think that, and in fact, I think we've made a little bit too much of our supposedly disagreement about Savok. Because to me, for example, Savok is about hierarchy and power distance and sort of a belief in the fact that powerful others control my destiny, and sort of this idea of an individualism internally with a display of collective allegiance. And the Afghans are not Savok in that the definition. But I actually wanted to thank both of the speakers, because I think that I wouldn't actually name this session the Combatants. I would name it something like the way myths are formed, because I think that what we've talked about is the idea of the in Ukrainian it's mythologizatsiya, the mythologization, the creation of myths. For example, the woman sniper and the Afghansi. Afghan is a myth, and I remember very well in the Maidan, about 10 days in, when the Samoborona was being formed, suddenly the idea of the Samoborona became legitimized because there's an Afghanska sotnya. And if there's an Afghanska sotnya, that means we're okay, because they will protect us, and they're the ones that know how to actually fight. I wonder if both of you could possibly comment a little bit about whether or not you believe that this idea of myth-making in a combative situation, to what extent is it being done, if you like, from the ground up, that this is a grassroots thing, and to what extent this is something that is being, if you like, dirigiste, someone is sort of, in other words, is this a top-down or a bottom-up process, or if there's the woman sniper is clearly a media meme, but it's also something that's popular amongst people. The Afghansi, it's also a media meme, but it's also something that is popular amongst people. How does that interplay happen?
Well, I can answer very briefly, because it's both. It's a cycle, and what you can really see how some representations are embedded in fiction. They are reactivated by officials, by the media, but they also correspond to some experience, and they wouldn't be reactivated this way if not. So I think it's really difficult to find the first time the legend came. So it's really being a process of a cycle process.
When I was doing my fieldwork in 2010, all of it was about myth. They were kind of in a magma of documents, imagery, mythology, stories of what an Afghanistan is. I wouldn't be. Today we are in a process, so I can't really answer you. But actually, to go back to our not so disagreement, I absolutely agree. And this is not you. I quoted it was Volodymyr Vyatorovich. I quoted on my presentation, right? And here the disagreement is stronger, I think. But what we have in the case of Afghanse, we still have practices that are really labeled as can really be labeled as Soviet. This practice, song festivals, in military fatigues and patriotic song. This is something from an anthropological point of view. This is really, really Soviet practices, and they are reactivated today at the front line. I have my guy, the singer, singing in front of the soldiers, and all his pictures are classical Soviet pictures of what is supposed to be in a good Soviet army, but actually he's on the Ukrainian side. This was also an invitation to reintegrate, not to have a different approach and a different vision of these practices labeled as Soviet.